That was Michael Anthony, okay? 100% dedicated, never did anything to hurt those guys, and they tried to hurt him again and again and again.
Behind Van Halen's explosive riffs, wild stage antics, and headline-making feuds, one man quietly held it all together, powerfully and with more sacrifice than most fans ever knew. Michael Anthony's journey wasn't just about bass lines and backing vocals. It was a story of loyalty tested, credits lost, and a betrayal discovered not through a call, but on the internet. In this untold chapter of rock history, we revisit the man whose low-end rhythm carried the band even when the spotlight rarely turned his way. His foundation in music began early, inspired by his trumpet-playing father, Walter Sobolewski, whose influence steered Michael into music from childhood. He started on the trumpet, participating in school music programs after moving to Southern California in the mid-1960s, eventually joining the marching band at Dana Junior High in Arcadia. But at 13, he turned toward rock and the bass guitar, wanting to carve a different path from his peers. With help from a friend and later support from his father, who gifted him a Fender Precision bass and Gibson amp, Anthony dove headfirst into bass playing, inspired by legends like Jack Bruce and John Paul Jones. A naturally left-handed player who trained himself to play right-hand, he developed a unique and flexible style that laid the groundwork for his future role in Van Halen. Before that destiny arrived, he played in local bands like Snake, where he not only played bass but sang lead vocals, performing at school dances and local clubs across the Pasadena area. It was during these gigs that Snake crossed paths with another local band, Mammoth, featuring Alex and Eddie Van Halen. After Michael generously offered Mammoth his band's PA system at a gig where theirs had failed, he left a lasting impression. When Mammoth's bassist left, the brothers remembered Anthony and invited him to jam. The chemistry was instant. His energetic bass lines and backing vocals added a new dimension to the group, and shortly after, they brought him on board. The band soon rebranded from Mammoth to Van Halen and solidified its now iconic lineup. David Lee Roth on vocals, Eddie on guitar, Alex on drums, and Michael on bass. For Anthony, joining Van Halen wasn't just a next step. It was a leap into rock history, launching him into an international spotlight he helped create but didn't always share in equally. As the band's story unfolded, so did his, a tale of musical strength, quiet resilience, and the cost of standing in the background while helping to build one of rock's loudest legacies. Michael Anthony quickly proved himself to be a vital part of Van Halen's musical identity. As the band made a mark across Los Angeles clubs like Gazzarri's and the Whiskey A Go-Go, Anthony's onstage energy and high-pitched harmony stood out. His backing vocal provided a sharp contrast to David Lee Roth's leads, helping define Van Halen's distinct vocal style in the saturated rock scene. His tight, no-frills bass playing served as the anchor to Eddie Van Halen's blistering guitar work and Alex Van Halen's thunderous drumming, allowing the band to maintain raw intensity with technical precision. When Van Halen released their 1978 debut under Warner Brothers Records, Anthony's contributions were unmistakable. His bass laid the foundation for tracks like Running with the Devil and Ain't Talking 'Bout Love, while his harmonies elevated songs like Jamie's Crying and Feel Your Love Tonight. As the band soared to fame, Anthony's steady musical presence and reputation for being low-maintenance stood in contrast to the volatile relationships within the group. In the early years, he was treated as an equal partner financially, receiving an even 20% share of profits, expenses, and decision-making responsibilities. But as Van Halen's fame grew and power dynamics shifted, the financial structure began favoring the Van Halen brothers and Roth, leaving Anthony with a shrinking stake. Still, Anthony remained loyal to the music and the band's progress, contributing through their multi-platinum streak in the late 1970s and early 1980s. By albums like Fair Warning and Diver Down, he had solidified his role as a rhythmic foundation and was essential to the band's live energy and studio recordings. While Eddie captivated audiences and Roth stole headlines, Anthony slowly earned overdue recognition as the band's unsung backbone. However, in 1984, during Van Halen's commercial peak with hits like Jump and Panama, a major internal shift occurred. According to former manager Noel Monk, Anthony was pressured into signing away all future songwriting credits and royalties. The contract, presented hour before a concert and signed under the watch of Eddie, Alex, and Roth, stripped Anthony of rights not only going forward but retroactively, including income from the massively successful 1984 album. That record alone sold over 10 million copies in the U.S., Yet Anthony saw none of the songwriting profits. The deal reduced him from equal partner to contracted performer, costing him millions in royalties from reissues, compilations, and licensing. Despite this unjust blow, Anthony remained silent for years, choosing professionalism over public complaint. Eventually, he opened up in interviews and fan events, confirming he had signed a contract under duress and lamenting the circumstances, but emphasizing that his loyalty to the band and love of music outweighed the personal cost. The 1984 contract controversy became a glaring example of how creative and financial control in the music industry can be stripped from even founding members, casting a long shadow over one of rock's most influential bands and one of its most underappreciated contributors. In the years following Van Halen's commercial peak, Michael Anthony began to experience a noticeable shift in how his contributions were publicly recognized, particularly by Eddie Van Halen. Although Anthony had been an integral part of the band's sound since its inception, Eddie began diminishing his role in interviews, implying that Anthony lacked the musical skill expected of a professional bassist. One of the most controversial claims came during a 2015 Billboard interview, where Eddie alleged that he had to show Anthony how to play every note and accused him of lacking initiative. The comment sparked immediate backlash from fans and musicians alike, many of whom viewed the statements as not only unfair but also historically inaccurate. Anthony's tight, no-frills bass lines and signature high harmony vocals had long been praised as a cornerstone of the band's live and studio sound. In response, Anthony refuted Eddie's claims, stating that he always learned the band's material independently and had never been taught by Eddie. He emphasized that no such instructional sessions had ever been documented, further supporting his assertion that Eddie's accusations were either exaggerated or entirely fabricated. The criticism wasn't just professionally damaging, it also wounded Anthony personally. In later interviews, he admitted the remarks were emotionally draining, especially coming from someone he had worked with for decades and once considered a close collaborator. He had always strived to keep peace within the band, even during its most chaotic times. Yet Eddie's public dismissals cast a temporary shadow over Anthony's reputation, leading some newer fans to question his abilities despite his long track record and the respect he'd earned from fellow musicians. Rather than retaliate publicly, Anthony chose restraint, though he later acknowledged that the growing distance between him and Eddie contributed significantly to the unraveling of their relationship. By the mid-2000s, the two were barely speaking, and Anthony had been quietly pushed out of the band's cooperations. After Eddie's death in 2020, Anthony expressed regret that they never had the chance to reconcile. Despite the media drama and harsh words, he had hoped for closure, an opportunity that never came. The divide between them remains a poignant example of how creative partnerships, no matter how legendary, can be torn apart by ego, miscommunication, and unresolved conflict. Behind the scenes, however, the damage was already taking root. By the late 1990s, Anthony's role in Van Halen began to shrink in subtle but telling ways. During the recording of the 1998 album Van Halen 3, he played bass on only 3 of the 11 tracks, with Eddie handling the rest, marking a shift in the group's internal dynamics. Though Anthony still appeared in promotional material and toured following the album's release, his minimal studio involvement raised red flags for fans and insiders alike. This marked the beginning of a gradual erasure, as Anthony's once essential role was increasingly minimized both creatively and operationally. As the band entered the 2000s, Anthony's visibility continued to decline. He participated in early reunion talks and appeared in interviews, but his input on actual recordings remained limited. On the 2004 compilation The Best of Both Worlds, he didn't play on the 3 new tracks. He only provided backing vocals, further reinforcing the idea that he was being phased out. That same year, Anthony joined Van Halen on what would become his final tour with the band, a highly publicized reunion with Sammy Hagar. But even this came with strings attached. According to Hagar, Anthony had to accept reduced financial compensation and sign a contract that treated him more like a hired musician than a full-fledged band member. Though the tour was a commercial success, it did little to heal old wounds. Anthony maintained a professional front, but the signs were clear. The band no longer saw him as part of its future. Behind the scenes, plans were already in motion to replace him. In 2006, Eddie Van Halen appointed his teenage son, Wolfgang Van Halen, as Anthony's successor. Anthony wasn't formally notified. Instead, he discovered the news through online rumors and fan speculation. He later revealed in interviews that he felt blindsided and deeply hurt. After decades of loyalty and contributions to the band's legacy, he hadn't even received a phone call. Emotionally sandbagged and pushed aside, Anthony was left grappling with the reality that he had been erased from the very band he helped build. The deterioration of his relationship with Eddie and Alex Van Halen made the split all the more painful. In the end, it wasn't a formal decision that ended his time with Van Halen. It was a quiet, systematic erasure. Sammy Hagar collaborations. Following his departure from Van Halen, Michael Anthony reconnected with longtime friend and former Van Halen frontman Sammy Hagar. Their musical chemistry, forged during the band's Van Hagar era, laid the foundation for multiple successful collaborations. One of their first major projects together after Van Halen was The Other Half, a touring act launched in 2005. The group, which featured Anthony and Hagar performing Van Halen hits from both the Roth and Hagar eras, was enthusiastically received by fans who felt the spirit of the original band lived on through their performances. The name The Other Half was a cheeky nod to their role as the often overlooked halves of Van Halen, and their live shows became a celebration of the music that defined a generation. In 2002, Anthony and Hagar also joined forces in a short-lived but ambitious supergroup called Planet Us. This lineup included guitar virtuoso Joe Satriani, drummer Dean Castronovo, and at one point, Journey guitarist Neil Schon. The band recorded a few tracks, including Psycho Vertigo and Peephole, which were later released on Hagar's 2008 solo album Cosmic Universal Fashion. Although the group never released a full album or completed a tour, it showcased Anthony's continued ability to work alongside some of rock's most accomplished musicians. The collaboration was a testament to his versatility and standing in the music world, even outside the Van Halen brand. Surprisingly, Anthony's most successful venture beyond Van Halen was Chickenfoot, formed in 2008. Once again teaming up with Hagar, the band also included guitarist Joe Satriani and Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer Chad Smith. In 2009, they released their self-titled debut, which debuted in the top 10 of the Billboard 200 and received glowing reviews. The band's chemistry and musicianship were widely praised, with Anthony's bass playing and vocal harmonies remaining integral to their sound. Their sophomore release, Chickenfoot 3, 2011, further proved they were more than a side project. Anthony still had plenty of creative fuel in the tank. In 2014, Anthony and Hagar teamed up once more to form Sammy Hagar and The Circle, which also featured Vic Johnson on guitar and Jason Bonham, son of Led Zeppelin legend John Bonham, on drums. The Circle's live performances blended Van Halen, Led Zeppelin, Montrose, and Hagar's solo tracks into a powerful and nostalgic experience for fans. The band eventually released original music, including the 2019 album Space Between, which hit number 4 on the Billboard 200, proving their relevance in the modern rock scene. Through all of these ventures, Anthony demonstrated that his passion for music remained undiminished and that his legacy extended far beyond his Van Halen years. Cancelled reunion tour. Following Eddie Van Halen's death in 2020, renewed interest sparked within the fan base and reportedly within the band's inner circle for a tribute tour honoring the guitarist's legacy. Reunion discussions gained traction through 2021 and 2022, with drummer Alex Van Halen reaching out to former members, including Michael Anthony and David Lee Roth. Guitarist Joe Satriani was also brought in as a potential stand-in. According to Satriani, serious talks took place to build a lineup that could honor Van Halen's rich history, with Anthony's presence considered essential to the tour's authenticity. Despite early enthusiasm, the reunion plans ultimately unraveled due to internal disagreements. One major point of contention reportedly came from David Lee Roth, who resisted key elements of the tribute format. According to Alex Van Halen and others close to the talks, Roth refused to participate in a concert that overtly honored Eddie's memory, not in the way the rest of the group had envisioned. His reluctance stole momentum and created friction. Adding to the complications, Alex Van Halen's health reportedly declined in 2022 after a back injury, making his participation in a physically demanding tour unlikely. With Roth stepping back and Alex facing health issues, two of the project's most critical pillars were gone. Michael Anthony later confirmed he had been contacted and was interested in participating. However, the logistical and emotional obstacles were too significant to overcome. While some parties remained willing, the reunion was ultimately deemed impossible, and no official tribute tour ever materialized. For Anthony, It meant being denied closure, a final moment on stage with Eddie and the full band that had defined so much of his life. Although he repaired his relationship with Wolfgang Van Halen, larger unresolved tensions with Roth and Alex remained. The cancelled tour underscored just how fractured the Van Halen family had become. Fans had hoped to see Anthony reunite with the surviving members one last time, but those dreams were quietly extinguished, and the opportunity for a true farewell faded into silence. Valerie Bertinelli, actress and ex-wife of Eddie Van Halen, has publicly stated her strong opposition to any biopic about the legendary guitarist or the band Van Halen, at least during her lifetime. In a 2023 interview, Bertinelli revealed that she had explicitly told her son, Wolfgang Van Halen, to make sure I'm dead before allowing such a film to happen. Her reasoning stemmed from a desire to protect the integrity of Eddie's memory and avoid any dramatized version of his complex life. She expressed concern that Hollywood might distort key aspects of his personality, musical journey, and struggles with addiction, which she felt should not be sensationalized for entertainment. Bertinelli's resistance to a biopic is rooted in deeply personal experiences. Having been married to Eddie from 1981 to 2007 and raising a son with him, she witnesses highs and lows firsthand. She has often spoken candidly about their difficult moments, particularly Eddie's battle with substance abuse and the toll it took on their relationship and family. For Valerie, the idea of watching those moments fictionalized on screen, even with artistic intent, would be emotionally overwhelming. While she did jokingly suggest that Selena Gomez could play her in a movie, she quickly added that she hoped the singer would decline if ever asked. Much of the protectiveness now extends under the umbrella of Wolfgang Van Halen's career. As a musician carrying the weight of his father's legacy while forging his own path, Wolfgang has repeatedly addressed the pressures of being Eddie's son. He has voiced his frustrations over fans and media making constant comparisons and has criticized those who shamelessly use his father's name or image to promote their own fame. In interviews, Wolfgang has emphasized honoring Eddie through music, not through dramatized films or public spectacles. This stance mirrors his mother's, and together, the family has maintained a unified front in preserving Eddie's legacy with dignity and restraint. Part of Valerie's reluctance is also shaped by a suspicion of Hollywood's instincts. The Van Halen family is still reeling from Eddie's death in 2020, and a biopic could risk reopening emotional wounds that are far from healed. She believes that compressing a life as rich and turbulent as Eddie's into a 2-hour film would only do injustice to the real person behind the legend. While Valerie remains a guardian of the past, Wolfgang is quietly shaping the future. Wolfgang Van Halen has become one of the most vocal figures in shaping public understanding of his father's legacy in the modern era. Through interviews and social media, he has taken aim at what he calls toxic fan culture, particularly those who weaponize nostalgia or insist on a return to the classic Van Halen lineup. He has expressed deep frustration with people who ignore the emotional realities of the band's history, especially following Eddie's death. Rather than push for a romanticized reunion or tribute tour, Wolfgang advocates for authenticity and respect over fan service. Beyond public statements, Wolfgang has confirmed the existence of a vast archive of unreleased Van Halen recordings, sparking speculation about potential posthumous releases. In 2023, guitarist Steve Lukather, a close friend of Eddie's and member of Toto, revealed that he and Alex Van Halen have been exploring the vaults. Lukather suggested there might be enough material for future projects, but he stressed that nothing would be released without the family's approval. Though fans are increasingly eager for a revival project using Eddie's unreleased work, Wolfgang has insisted that any such endeavor would require delicate handling. He has reiterated that there are no plans at the moment for a new Van Halen album or tour, emphasizing that the band can't exist without my dad. While he acknowledged there could be ways to honor Eddie, he remains firmly against commercializing his father's legacy. Instead, Wolfgang's stewardship has been cautious, thoughtful, and grounded in the preservation of Eddie's integrity. Rumors about a tribute or revival have lingered, with Joe Satriani mentioning early conversations involving former band members and collaborators. However, nothing substantial has materialized. For now, Wolfgang is fully focused on his own musical journey with Mammoth WVH, where he writes, records, and performs every part of the music himself. Though the future of the Van Halen name remains uncertain, one thing is clear. Wolfgang will ensure that any archival or celebratory project reflects true musical greatness and emotional sincerity. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more untold stories from rock history. And hey, don't go anywhere. Click the next video on your screen to keep the music going.